Good afternoon, folks. Hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I'm going to focus on what my plans going forward for the next European season, which is due to commence late July, early August. Although I will be holding limited cards and putting teams in for that, this video is focused solely on the rare cards. The leagues I'm going to be focusing on purely due to budget restrictions is the Cap 220 and the Cap 240. My aim first and foremost is to win as much or as many threshold payments as I possibly can. I'm going to list every player or mention every player that I've bought for these two teams. I'm going to go into detail on why I bought them and why I believe they're good options. And hopefully this will give, in particular, new users some sort of ideas on the players they should be looking for if they're aiming at those leagues, whether that's limited, rare, whatever. It'll give them some sort of idea on the players they should be looking for. So I'm going to start with the goalkeepers, and as you can see, I've got potentially and hopefully two guaranteed number ones if they're fit. I want to try and add at least another one because I think with these cap leagues, you need as many options as you possibly can. For example, David Marshall, if he was playing Celtic one week and David Jensen was playing away to Galatasaray, I wouldn't particularly want either goalkeeper in my 240 team because the likelihood is they're going to concede shitloads of goals. Therefore, they're not going to score very well. Therefore, I would like at least three options in the hope that each game week, one of them has got a relatively easier game. So, like I said, I'm aiming to get three what I would class as guaranteed number ones if fit, and I'd like three options in every position if possible. Now, the first thing I would check is the contract status, and obviously checking on transfer market. I can see he's got a contract at least until the end of next season. I don't want to buy a goalkeeper whose contract is coming up at the end of this summer because if he moves, then you don't know what could happen. He could go to a league that's not covered. Obviously, that could happen while they're in contract, but there's less likely of that happening, in my opinion. Next, I checked who scored to ensure when they're fit that they play. And as you can see, he started 32 games last season, so that would indicate to me that he is or was their regular starting goalkeeper, and the hope is that would continue into next season. One thing I don't particularly like, if I'm being perfectly honest, is his last 15 average. It's too high for me. But if you take a look at So Rare data, you can see the last 10 games he's hit some decent scores in there, which has obviously pushed his average up. Now, I believe the price I paid for him, which is 150 quid, is good value, providing he starts and is their number one goalkeeper next season. He plays for Istanbulspor, who are not the greatest side in Turkey, but you've got to be realistic. You obviously need them not to be scoring fantastically well all the time because they're not going to fit into a cap 240 team. And better the team they play for, ordinarily their prices are going to be a lot higher. So, in my opinion, 150 quid is decent value. My next guy, David Marshall, the Hibs keeper up in Scotland. He is getting on. I think he's 38, 39 years of age now. Again, looking at transfer market, his contract runs up next summer. Reading the information on Hibs, is my understanding he will be the number one goalkeeper next season. They're going to lose a few goalkeepers in the summer. So the hope is they'll just get a young understudy who will learn his trade off my man. And David Marshall will keep his place for the whole of next season and be the number one keeper. Like I said, the days or the weeks that they're going to be facing Celtic or Rangers, I don't particularly want him in that team. And going back, that's why I want as many options as I possibly can. The Hibs, I believe, finished fifth or sixth this season. They're not a bad team. They'll hold their own against the other average teams in the SPL. I picked him up for 116 quid about 2 weeks ago. I believe he went on auction for about 140, 150 quid either yesterday or the day before. It's not actually showing in the last rare sales, but I know there was an auction in the last 24 hours or so, and I'm sure it was 140 odd quid. So again, I think I've made a good deal there for the price I've got him for. Again, providing he is the number one goalkeeper next season. So just to recap my goalies, like I said, I want another one in just to give me that third option for when these teams, if by any chance they're all faced with hard opposition in their current leagues, so I can pick the easiest fixture. I also just want to point out about David Jensen, and this is just a side issue, because Turkey's a Muslim country. They will play, or more often than not, Christmas Day. So depending when the game week falls, which you would need to look at, I haven't looked into it as yet. But if that fell into the last bit of the game week and there were no other fixtures, then that could prove pivotal if you've got all Turkish players. So it's just another thing to consider basically. In terms of defenders, as you can see, I've got 9. Some of these were bought a while back and they wouldn't be classed as first team starters, or some of them are not even in leagues that so rare cover, like this Bogdan, who plays in Ukraine. There's another geezer in my gallery who plays in the MLS second division or some bloody place like that, so that's obviously not covered. However, I've bought what I believe is a steal, and that is Hamza Mendel. As you can see, I paid £8.52 for him. He plays for a decent side in Belgium, Leuven. As you can see on transfer market, he's got a contract till 2025. They signed him last year from Schalke. And in my opinion, the Belgian league's easier than the German league. The 28 games that he was fit for, he started 25. So that would indicate to me, quite obviously, that he was a first team starter for them next season. As much as the information I can gather, there is nothing to suggest that he won't be for next season. So for 8, 9 quid, I think he's an absolute bargain. Looking on data, he's capable of putting in 100, like you can see there, but overall, bang average. But that's what you're going to have in a lot of your positions in these cap teams. And the hope is one week they all click at the same time and bang in good scores. The next lad I bought was Boris Popovic, and he's a centre half for Cercle Bruges. As you can see, I paid £12.81 for him. Again, for a rare starting defender, I think that's excellent value for money. You will see he came from the Monaco youth system. That's where they bought him from. He's contracted until June 2025, plus they've got an option for another year. And what I like about this boy, he's only 23 and started most games last year. He started 33 games in Belgium last season. So there is nothing to indicate to me that he won't be a regular starter for him again next season. Again, looking at so rare data, nothing to write home about his scores. However, I think he will improve in age. That's the hope. The older they get, the more consistent they become and they start hitting better scores. But for me, especially with threshold teams, first and foremost, you need players who start on a regular basis. Now, I have got other options for defenders, as you can see here. I already owned them before I started looking into building these sides. So I'm not going to list them in here because they weren't bought for that specific reason. However, some of them will able to fit into this system for my 220, 240 teams. So I'm sure one or two of them will come in useful. Now, I'm going to contradict myself somewhat here. However, the prices of some of these players that were going, I couldn't leave them that price. Now, I say with especially threshold teams, the first thing you need to look at is these players play week in, week out when fit. Some of these might not fit that, but like I said, I think they're too much, or they possess too much quality, and for the price, I just had to buy him. The first one is Davy Klaassen from Ajax. Ajax have been very disappointing this season. Um, so there could be a huge clear out in the summer. But in a nutshell, that's why I forked out 28 quid for him. His stats are outstanding, in my opinion. Even in a dodgy season where they've been poor, he's not always been a regular starter. He's managed to bag 8 goals and 3 assists in 33 games. And if you look at his stats over the last 4 or 5 seasons, like I said, for 28 quid, I don't think you're going to find much better than that. However, like I said, there is a danger that he will not be first team regular. However, in my opinion, if he isn't, I think he will try and push for a move because I think he's too good to be a sub, especially in the Dutch league for any team. So that is the reasons I'm getting Davy in. I touched on Matt Ritz in a video I done a few weeks ago. Again, for 27 quid, plays for a top team in Belgium, even though they've been disappointing this season, or the season's just finished. He suffered a horrendous injury towards the end of last season. He missed the first 6, 7 months of this season. Um, the hope is now he's fully fit and he establishes himself as a number one, which he was prior to his injury. The risk with Club Brugge is because they've been so disappointing this season. They look for a mass clear out and get new players in, and Matt Ritz could be a risk in that scenario. However, if he stays in Belgium, I think he's a top player for that league. Incidentally, he did or was on the set pieces for Club Brugge towards the end of the season. Whether that's the case, depending who they bring in the summer, then who knows. But that could be a nice little bonus for someone like him. He's also part of the Ajax Academy. That's where he learnt his trade. And as you can see, his stats for a defensive sort of midfielder, they're not bad. And in my opinion, if fit, this boy will play. The last election is probably the most controversial because there's a lot of risk with this lad, and that lad is Gus Till. Now, just my personal opinion, and I know it doesn't add to their scoring because sometimes a good player viewing him doesn't make him a good scorer on So Rare in particular, especially on the Matrix. I like this player. I think he's quality. He was at Feyenoord the season before last, moved to PSV, doesn't regularly start, or he's not a regular starter where you could be a life on that he's going to start every game. However, looking at his stats at Feyenoord in 32 games the season before last, he scored 15 and assisted 3. And this season at PSV, like I said, he hasn't always started. In 30 appearances, he scored 9 and assisted 3. And I think they're decent returns. He plays as what I would class as an attacking midfielder. And they're the sort of boys I like to have in my teams because they can obviously, or they've got a better chance of scoring or assisting. Now, I know his contract runs till 2026 because I know they signed him from Spartak Moscow and not Feyenoord because he was sent on loan. But I think he's got a 4 year deal or 3 years left. I know Rude's just left the club, so a new manager's coming in. The hope is whoever he is fancies him and plays him on a regular basis because if he does, I think he's excellent value. So I would class the 3 midfielders that I have bought as potentially risky selections. However, I have got other options in that midfield role. And I'm going to play it by ear and see what happens in the new season, whether they're starting or not, and then I'll go from there. But for the amount that I've paid for them, I'm more than happy because, in my opinion, they're three quality players. Just going through the other lot I could use. Demrebe for Leverkusen. He's not a guaranteed starter. I think I can see him moving potentially in the summer. Um, and there's a few geezers there who, in my opinion, will be regular starters. So, like I said, if these three risks don't work out, then I've got cover. Now, for my strikers, I've got 8 at this moment. You can see I've got one listed, and he was my tier 3 reward from this game week. Simon, I assume you pronounce that as Becker. The only reason I'm selling him because he's a decent reward in my opinion. He knows how to find the net. He's got a decent goal scoring record. Is I've got no American players to play this season, so just want to get rid of him and try and get in a few other options for my European team. So I've taken a risk on this geezer who I bought last night, Moses Uzor. He was at Lask for the majority of last season. I think they signed him in January on loan. He plays for Slavia Prague. He could potentially go back to Slavia Prague now because I don't know whether they've taken up the option to buy him. But he's quick as lightning. He's only 21. He's a young lad. And I think in that league he could prosper in time. And he's just a decent option to have, in my opinion. But like I said, if he stays at Slavia Prague, he's going to be in a league where so rare don't cover. So I've taken a risk on him. My next purchase, and I believe I've had a steal, is Andrea Patagna. And for 30 quid, like I said, I think it's a steal. Napoli paid 16 million quid for this man when he was at Spal. It's not worked out for him at Napoli. He's not good enough at that level, in my opinion, anyway. He's now gone to Monza on a full team. He's been on loan there. He's now signed on a permanent deal. As you can see at Spal, he banged him in on a regular basis. Obviously, at Napoli, he struggled for game time and he's not been that prolific at Monza this year. However, he's only 27 years of age, should be coming into his prime. He's the penalty taker when he plays. So I think there's a lot of luck involved, but I think this guy could be an absolute bargain. He could potentially be my bargain buy of the summer. Now, I have got offers in on other positions. I'm looking at goalkeepers in specifically and also strikers because I believe that's where I need strengthening the most. I have got a few options in the striking department. Hoffman of Bochum in Germany, Mustafa from Lask, who, if the reason why I bought that Moses, if he goes, then in my opinion, Mustafa plays, even though they're slightly different positions they play in. I think one of them will guarantee to start if they're both there. I don't know who this guy is, to be perfectly honest. Marquez, I won him as a reward a few weeks ago. He doesn't start for NEC in Holland, but I don't know. His goal scoring record isn't bad. When he comes off the bench, he scores quite often. So who knows? He could be an option potentially. Add Emilson, my man who plays in China. He's obviously an option, but the problem is now he's going to play when I haven't got any other players to play with him. So he's only going to come in handy about 2, 3 months of the year, unfortunately. So, guys, like I said, my priority is going to be the Cap 240 purely for the threshold payments of this moment in time stands at $50. I'm convinced anyone now with a bit of research and a bit of football knowledge could get a team for, and this is including the goalkeeper's price. If you're prepared to wait a few months till the season starts in Europe, I'm convinced you can get a starting team, all five positions starting for no more than 250 quid maximum, which I think is outstanding value, providing So Rare keep the threshold payments at $50, which I don't see any reason why they would reduce that. And that is why, in my opinion, people should be targeting thresholds, rare threshold payments, or rare teams that can win you those payments before anything else. Limited is fantastic. I'm not knocking limited, but in my opinion, it's far too competitive. You've got to spend a fortune to win the top cards because you're up against the top players, and there's obviously a lot more limited cards than rare. So, in my opinion, if I was starting So Rare today, but I had the knowledge that I have today as well, I would be focusing and targeting the rare team and especially the threshold team. I hope this video gives, like I said at the beginning, people who are starting So Rare some idea on what to look for if they are targeting thresholds. And that's about it, really, guys. So, one thing to add, if anyone's got suggestions for the threshold players, please put them in the comments below. And all the very best to you, and good luck. See you now. Bye.